Good morning, YouTubers! Today we're going to look at one of the more obscure pieces of hardware for the 8-bit NES, the Game Genie. Some of you may be familiar with this piece of hardware already. Maybe you grew up with it or had a friend who had one. So, what is it? Well, it was a device you attached to your NES games that worked by changing the game's code, therefore allowing you to play the game using different rules. In other words, this thing allowed you to cheat. If you wanted infinite lives or all the weapons of the game, this thing would let you do it. So how did the Game Genie even come about? It all started in 1986 with a company called Codemasters. The company had previously been known as Electronic Games Company Limited and was formed in Southend, Warwickshire. Or is it Warwickshire? My American accent tells me it's Warwickshire, for sure. Anyway, Codemasters got its start by programming games for various systems, such as the ZX Spectrum, the Acorn Electron, the BBC Micro, the Commodore 16, the Commodore 64, the Commodore Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, and the Atari ST. That's it? You guys didn't want to add any more game systems to the mix? After Codemasters designed what would eventually be the Game Genie, they sold the rights to Camerica and Galoob. While Camerica manufactured the Game Genie, they were only responsible for the Canadian and UK distribution, tapping Galoob for the American distribution. Camerica was actually formed as a wholesaler for such products as crystals and pottery? Is that right? Yeah, crystals and pottery. So the gaming market was new territory for them. However, they already had the distribution process down, so it made them a logical partner for getting this type of product into the market. And Camerica actually took their new role in the gaming market quite seriously, going on to not only produce unlicensed games themselves, but in a manner slightly different from other companies that also produced unlicensed games. I already discussed Color Dreams in a previous episode, and I'll be covering Tengen in a later one. But unlike either of those companies, Camerica attempted to take a slightly different approach with bypassing the lockout chip Nintendo used in their games. Instead of including the key required to play the games in each cartridge, they developed a separate piece of hardware sold separately, which they dubbed the Aladdin Deck Enhancer, that could be used in any of their games. The intention was to save money by having consumers purchase this one piece of hardware with the key already installed, instead of providing a separate key in each cartridge. It was a smart idea, however, it was too little, too late. The device was first released in 1992, making it a little late to the 8-bit party. Heading south of the border, Galoob distributed the Game Genie in the United States. They're also known for a hit toy called Micro Machines. These were little cars, even smaller than Matchbox cars, that also had playsets available. Growing up in 1980s America, I had a healthy set of both Micro Machines and Matchbox cars, so I can't really say anything bad about either of them, other than now, they are a little small for my grown-up hands. More importantly than Micro Machines, Galoob is also known for being the defendant in a landmark lawsuit. In 1990, Nintendo of America filed suit against Galoob, alleging that the Game Genie product they released while under license by Codemasters violated Nintendo's copyrights by modifying the program code used to play the game. In response, Galoob filed an injunction against Nintendo, preventing them from modifying their 8-bit console from being incompatible with the Game Genie. In their response, Nintendo filed their own injunction against Galoob to prevent them from even selling the Game Genie.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
The whole thing was like the final scene of Pulp Fiction, but with nerds.
You let him go! You let him go! Let go of it!
Tell that to be cool.
I'm gonna kill you!
Say be cool.
Be cool, honey.
Say be cool. Tell that bitch to chill.
Be cool, honey.
Chill that bitch out.
Just chill out, honey bunny.
Chill.
Just chill out, honey bunny.
All right, now tell her it's gonna be all right.
It's gonna be all right.
Promise her.
I promise.
Nintendo was relying on a 1982 court case where Midway Manufacturing sued Arctic International for allegedly infringing on their copyrights for 2 arcade games. Arctic had created and sold separate ROM chips that, once installed, would speed up the game Galaxian. They also produced a circuit board for a game they called Puckman, which looked eerily similar to Midway's hit Pac-Man. In court, Arctic claimed that they hadn't violated Midway's copyrights, arguing that video games are not protected by copyrights. They argued video games didn't meet the copyright requirements under US Law 17 USC 102A, which I know we all have memorized, because they weren't fixed in any tangible medium of expression as required in said law. Arctic also argued that the ROM chips used in Midway's games didn't contain copyrighted materials on a fixed medium, but rather contained instructions to generate copyrighted materials that were not fixed. In addition to these arguments, Arctic also cited a committee report from the House of Representatives in the 94th Congress that said, evanescent or transient reproductions shown electronically on a screen or captured momentarily in the memory of a computer were not protected under the definition of fixation as required for copyrightability. Midway argued that since the game's demo modes were repeated identically each time the system was turned on, that constitutes copyright protection. They also argued that since the game repeated in other ways during the gameplay itself, that also subjected the material as fixed, therefore qualifying for copyright protection. Judge Bernard Decker ultimately ruled in favor of Midway, noting that the law does not require work to be written down in the exact way that it is perceived by the human eye. The judge also rejected Arctic's defense of the Congressional Committee report, adding the mere report itself only suggests a discussion of what constitutes as a fixed medium that qualifies for copyright. Judge Decker added that the discussion only meant to exclude images on TV or computer screens, like live broadcasts that were not recorded or fixed elsewhere to a medium intended for reproduction, such as videotape, a memory chip, or any such storage device. The next year, the Court of Appeals upheld the lower court's ruling, and shortly after, the U.S. Copyright Office ceased allowing video game manufacturers to register the display of a game and the computer program separately. Previously, one would be registered as an audio-visual work and the other as a literary work. Now the registrant must choose which of the two aspects of the game are most prominent and only file as one type of work, which leads us back to 1990 and the Gloob Nintendo lawsuit.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
In July, the court granted Nintendo's request and ordered a preliminary injunction against Gloob, instructing that they were not to sell the Game Genie until the dispute was resolved. The court also ordered Nintendo to post a bond of what was originally $100,000, later changed to $15 million, in order to ensure Gloob be compensated for sales lost should Gloob win the case. Gloob lost their appeal to the injunction. After a lengthy 12-month court battle, District Judge Fern Smith ruled in favor of Gloob, agreeing that the Game Genie did not violate any of Nintendo's copyrights.
Game over? No way!
In her ruling, Judge Smith compared the Game Genie device to the act of skipping chapters of a book or fast-forwarding through a movie. Judge Smith added, having paid Nintendo a fair return, the consumer may experiment with the product and create new variations of play for personal enjoyment without creating a derivative work. Nintendo lost their appeal of the decision, and in December of '91, a hearing was staged to determine how much of the $15 million bond Nintendo would be ordered to pay Gloob for lost profits. The court determined that potential profits actually exceeded the $15 million bond and ordered Nintendo to pay more, plus legal fees. Alright, so now it's legal to actually buy one of these things? How does it actually work? Essentially, it works by attaching to the game cartridge, then inserting it into the console like this. When you turn on the console, a screen appears and you can add up to 3 codes that modify the game in some way. However, some codes require 2 lines to work. Mostly, the typical cheats include infinite lives, weapons, level skipping, or in some cases, making the game more difficult. There were also Game Genies for the Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Sega Genesis, and Game Gear. While Nintendo hated the very idea of the Game Genie, Sega, on the other hand, embraced it fully by giving it their full seal of approval. With Sega games, there was one catch, and that was it wouldn't work with games that had a save feature. Later on, Codemasters did develop a more advanced Game Genie 2, but it died in the prototype stage and never made it to market. What impact did the Game Genie leave on the gaming industry? Well, big one actually. The idea that users can manipulate the game they're playing not only hasn't gone away, but it's bigger than ever before. Starting with Duke Nukem 3D in the 90s, players began designing and implementing their own levels. These were essentially the first ROM hacks. In today's gaming market, ROM hacks are quite common. Players commonly edit a game's graphics, text, level layout, and even character properties. And if you look at a game like Minecraft, that's all it is, a player creating the world the game is in. When the Game Genie was first released, it was commonly referred to as a way to cheat the game, but now that same concept is simply referred to as modifying the game. While there's certainly arguments for and against the use of the Game Genie, One thing either side can't deny is the impact this device had on gaming. Personally, I can do without it, but it is fun to hook it up to your favorite games and see what stuff you can do. Well, that's it for this episode of The Bearded Nerd. Thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button if you want to keep up with future videos, and feel free to write hateful comments below. See you next time.